Hi everyone, Keith here, the cemetery detective, coming to you from the beautiful state of Michigan in Ishpeming at the Ishpeming Cemetery. This cemetery was particularly interesting to me because of cemetery management's challenges that they faced in the past with proper documentation. If you have watched many of my videos or if you've ever heard one of my presentations, you know how important proper documentation is to me, including temporal documentation and geospatial documentation, along with visual representation of that documentation. Normally, I take the data that I collect and dump it into spreadsheet form where I can perform statistical analysis, and then I can also turn that into a visual representation by way of GIS and making maps of the cemeteries that I visit. I've produced a podcast of Ishpeming Cemetery. You're going to hear it in just a few moments. I will forewarn you, the podcast is made with AI, and I know some of you won't like that one little bit, but I'm here to tell you, AI is the future. It's not just funny little videos that you see online. AI will help us be better stewards of the cemeteries that we love, not only from individual grave sites and their locations, but also to upper-level management questions, such as how to be better planners in the layouts of future expansion of our cemeteries. I will let this podcast play out. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section below, or you can contact me directly through my website, The Cemetery Detective. Once again, this is Keith. I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a really fascinating journey, taking a bit of a detour right into the heart of Ishpeming, Michigan. And our target, well, it isn't your typical historical landmark or museum. It's a single cemetery.
Right.
A place that, based on what we found, seems less like a peaceful resting site and more like a really complex, layered historical record. It just happens to be underground.
Yeah, it's a spectacular case study, actually. You've got local history, administration, even modern data science all tangled up.
Usually you think of cemeteries as, static places, monuments to the past.
Exactly. But the history of the Ishpeming Cemetery is, well, it's anything but fixed. It's a history that has literally physically moved.
Boo.
Yeah, and it left behind this wake of administrative nightmares and these huge information black holes.
Okay, so our mission today is to give you the shortcut to understanding all this complexity. We're breaking this deep dive into three main threads. First, the amazing personal stories of the people being remembered, brought to life by local historians.
Really important work.
Second, the honestly shocking administrative story of physically relocating the entire site, which, as you said, caused massive information gaps years ago.
Huge gaps, yeah.
And finally, how modern tech, specifically video and geospatial mapping, is being used right now to try and stabilize this kind of shifting historical landscape.
It's the perfect blend, isn't it? High human drama and high-tech preservation, all in one place.
Exactly. So let's start by anchoring ourselves in that human element, because the Ishpeming Area Historical Society, the IAHS, they're doing really crucial work making sure these local heroes aren't forgotten.
They are. They host an annual cemetery tour, and that's really where you find the most accessible, kind of poignant stories.
Right, the tour.
Yeah, these tours are the IAHS's way of, fighting that historical apathy. They're run by a local historian, Karen Casper, and they function like a focused 1-hour walking tour. Starts at the sexton's office, runs every Tuesday evening, early July through late August.
Pretty regular, though.
Yeah, and you give a small suggested donation, which goes right back to the Historical Society. It's like $10 for adults, $5 for teens, kids are free, and you get this massive return on local knowledge.
And the detail they highlight on the people each year, it's just fantastic. It really grounds these big historical moments in specific lives.
Absolutely.
Our sources detail some from the 2024 tour, and these are real community builders.
They really are. You've got figures like Al Qual. He wasn't just a caretaker. He was instrumental in planning and actually overseeing the development of the Al Qual recreation area way back in the 1930s.
Wow. So he physically helped shape the community's landscape. For leisure, even.
Yeah, exactly. And then you see these personal stories connecting Ishpeming right to global events.
like the nurses.
Yes. The 2024 tour featured two sisters, both nurses in wartime. Ethel Rummer served in World War I, and her sister, Helen Anderson, served in World War II.
Two sisters, two world wars.
Yeah.
Buried near each other.
Right. Think about seeing the impact of those huge global conflicts reflected just like that in one family. It's powerful.
It really is.
And we also see the IAHS's scope is, well, it's incredibly broad. The tours actually started back in 2017. That was for the 100th anniversary of World War I.
Oh.
But it quickly became about much more than just military service. The mission really is to illuminate these big names that history kind of tends to forget. Former mayors, civic leaders, that sort of thing.
What stands out to me is how many of these people had an impact, way beyond just the city limits.
That's true.
You mentioned Carl Tellerson. He wasn't just some local enthusiast. He was apparently crucial in establishing skiing as a sport in Ishpeming.
Yeah, and he's now an honored member of the United States Ski Hall of Fame, which, by the way, is also in Ishpeming.
Right. And then there's Horace Olin Young.
Yes. Arguably the most nationally significant person buried there.
The sources note he's probably the only Ishpeming citizen ever elected to the U.S. House of Representatives.
That's right. These tours, they really remind you that local history isn't isolated. It's woven right into the national fabric.
It truly is. So this local society is doing this difficult work of historical retention, one story at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But this brings us to the part of the deep dive that really ramps up the complexity. If the IAHS is working so hard now to find these stories, does that suggest that a lot of the administrative history of the cemetery itself has been lost?
Or maybe.
Or maybe never properly recorded in the first place?
That's the perfect pivot, because the answer is a resounding yes. The history of the cemetery involves an administrative failure of, historic proportions.
Okay.
A failure rooted in this incredibly difficult decision to physically move the entire site.
Right, you mentioned it moved.
And this is a crucial point for you, the listener, to understand, because it explains exactly why this modern digital documentation we'll talk about is so vital.
So the current Ishpeming Cemetery isn't the original one. Where was the first site located?
All right, so the first cemetery, which started taking burials in the late 1860s, that was on North Main Street, kind of between Pine and Maple Streets.
North Main, okay.
And it was split into two parts. A city section, about 3.36 acres, and then the Catholic St. John's Cemetery portion.
Got it.
The earliest Catholic burial they have records for is way back May 3rd, 1871, Martin Wall.
So why move? I mean, you don't just decide to uproot an entire graveyard unless there's a really, really big reason.
Well, the reason was purely environmental and logistical. And frankly, it suggests maybe not the best choice for the original location. The city actually recognized the problem pretty early on. They were looking for a new site as early as 1882.
Okay, so what were the issues?
The sources cite two main things. One, the terrain was really rough, made maintenance expansion just difficult.
Makes it.
But the absolutely critical issue was the topsoil. There was only about 3 feet of it.
3 feet? Wow. That's not nearly enough for long-term burials, is it?
Not at all. It was basically an untenable situation. So the last recorded burial at that original Main Street site was in July 1887.
Okay.
And the site was officially abandoned just 3 years later, 1890. That's when they developed the new site, the current one, out on Deer Lake Avenue.
Then came the monumental and frankly kind of horrifying task of moving the deceased.
Horrifying is a good word for it.
They had to relocate thousands of people, and this is long before modern heavy equipment. How many bodies are we talking about, and how long did that take?
It was an immense undertaking. It spanned 6 years, actually, from 1905 to 1911.
6 years?
Yeah. They removed and reinterred over 3,000 bodies from that old location to the new Deer Lake Avenue site.
Over 3,000.
Moving 3,000 graves requires just staggering manpower, logistics, record keeping, especially, in the early 20th century.
You could just imagine how chaotic that process must have been. And this is where that administrative gap became a massive problem, right?
Yeah. Exactly. The problem wasn't just the physical effort, huge as that was, it was the documentation failure that came before it. During the first, say, 2 decades of the original cemetery's operation, the late 1860s, 1870s, into the 80s, there was a severe lack of grave registration.
Meaning they just didn't keep good records.
They simply didn't keep adequate records of who was buried where, particularly in the areas they called Potter's Field, the common burial ground for the poor or unidentified.
So when the crew showed up in 1905 to move these 3,000 bodies, they were essentially guessing at the locations of Potentially hundreds, maybe even thousands of others.
Pretty much. They only moved the graves they could visibly identify or that they actually had some kind of paper record for.
Wow. So the paper trail failed them.
It failed spectacularly, and the bodies were simply missed, left behind.
And the consequence of that gap, that failure in documentation, that's really the most striking part of this story, isn't it?
It really is. And tragic, because that old site on North Main Street, it was abandoned, and eventually people started building houses there. Wait, houses were built right over the original burial ground, where people were still buried.
Yes. And decades later, we're talking the 1930s now, when those houses were being built or maybe foundations were being dug,
Oh no.
unidentified bodies were recovered. Can you imagine the shock, the horror for local residents digging a foundation and finding human remains 50 years after the cemetery was supposed to be empty? Relocated.
That is just a staggering human cost, all resulting from not having a decent grave registry back in the 1870s and 80s.
Yeah. That administrative failure literally created these physical, horrific problems for the next generation.
It really drives home the importance of accurate records, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And if we look at the current administration, okay, the city of Ishpeming DPW governs the modern site. They maintain records, but those records only start in 1894.
Still leaving that gap.
Still leaving that massive gap, covering the first, 25 to 30 years of the cemetery's original operation, from the late 1860s right up to the move. That missing generation of data is the primary challenge for researchers today. So the history is literally shaky, defined by rough terrain and lost paperwork. This whole historical context, the move, the thousands of missing, unidentified bodies.
Right.
This is why the modern effort to document the current site is so critical.
Exactly.
If the paper trail failed us so badly in the 19th century, how exactly is this cemetery detective making sure that never ever happens again?
Okay, so this is where we shift gears. We move from historical investigation into modern data science.
Right.
We have sources detailing a visit from the cemetery detective in 2025, and their whole mission was to create a comprehensive digital record of the site.
Okay.
They're essentially creating a fixed point in time using technology specifically designed to handle sites that have, a history of being disorganized or physically moved, like Ishpeming.
So tell us about the technique. How are they combining technologies to map something like this? Especially since, like you said, pathways in an old cemetery might shift over time.
It's a really methodical two-part documentation process. It combines the visual evidence with spatial precision. So they tackle the what and the where at the same time.
Okay, let's start with the what, the visual part. How does that work?
Right, that's the temporal evidence. It comes from video documentation. They use a standard camera mounted to record a continuous drive-through video of the entire roadway network within the cemetery.
Like a dash cam recording.
Sort of, but very systematic. Think of it like creating a fixed timestamp, a digital snapshot of the entire cemetery exactly as it existed in 2025.
And this captures everything.
Everything visible from the road, every gravestone, every fence line, every tree, even temporary features like flags or flowers left by visitors. It gives you that human scale view.
Okay, that gives you the view, the what it looked like, but not the accurate location, the where. So how do they assign a precise latitude and longitude to every single frame of that video?
That's the second crucial part, the spatial precision. And that's achieved using GPX tracking.
GPX. Okay.
They use a dedicated data logger device running simultaneously with the video recording. It records these GPX tracks of the roadways while they're driving the same route.
Wait, break that down for me. What exactly is a GPX track? For someone like me who doesn't work with mapping software every day.
Okay, yeah. Think of a GPX track as an extremely accurate digital breadcrumb trail. GPX stands for GPS Exchange Format.
Okay.
It's basically a file containing a long series of highly precise points, latitude, longitude, sometimes altitude recorded sequentially, maybe every second or even faster.
So much more accurate than just using my phone's GPS.
Oh, much more. Instead of relying on something broad, like, say, Google Maps on your phone, this dedicated data logger gives them coordinates that are accurate down to the meter level. Sometimes even better.
Okay, so they drive the road, they film everything in front of them, and at the same time, this other device is capturing the super high resolution breadcrumb trail of exactly where the car was, second by second.
Exactly right. Then that raw GPX data, that breadcrumb trail file, is imported into specialized mapping software, GIS software.
GIS.
Geographic Information System. like QGIS or ArcGIS, the kind professional city planners and geographers use.
Got it.
And in that software, the GPX data is converted into what are called polylines, which is just a fancy term for a feature on the map that represents the road network as a series of connected, meter-accurate digital lines.
So the synthesis is the key then, where the video meets the map. How does the system actually link that visual video evidence to those precise map coordinates?
The real power comes from time synchronization, because both the video and the GPX data were collected at the exact same moment.
Ah, okay.
The software can synchronize them. It matches the visual evidence, say, a specific frame of video showing a particular gravestone to the exact spatial coordinates recorded by the data logger at that precise time.
So you could like click on a point on the digital map of the cemetery road?
Exactly. You click on a section of that digital road map, and the system can instantly pull up the video snippet showing exactly what that spot looked like in 2025.
That is such a vital solution, especially given the problems the 19th century administrators faced with lost records. This documentation, it matters deeply, right? Not just for historians, but for people using this information today.
Oh, the applications are immense. Think about genealogists, for instance.
Right. Family history researchers.
They can use the city's paper records, which start in 1894, or maybe online memorials like Find a Grave. Then they can use this 2025 video archive as absolute visual confirmation.
So they can match a name to an actual physical monument.
Yes. Confirm the inscription, see the conditions, see the surrounding features. It bridges that gap between paper and physical reality.
And for the current municipal staff, the people managing the cemetery now, this must be like the final safeguard against repeating the mistakes of the past. Losing graves, misplacing monuments.
Absolutely. For preservationists, too. They can compare this 2025 video archive with future documentation maybe done again in 2030 or 2035 to detect damage, maybe track landscape changes, spot vandalism almost instantly.
Yeah.
And for the municipal staff running the grounds day to day, this provides an invaluable visual and spatial reference for any repair work, maybe even future relocation work if needed. It helps ensure that the graves of the missing, or those in tricky sections like the original Potter's Field, are never lost again simply due to a lack of coordinate data.
The cemetery detective source even provided a quick tip, didn't it? Something about the sign.
Yeah, a practical point. Always record a clear shot of the main cemetery sign.
Why is that important?
It just confirms the context, the legal name, the place, maybe even the governing body. It anchors all the visual data that follows. It seems small, but it's vital for future researchers.
So this fusion, this meticulous human-scale video combined with meter-accurate spatial data, it's essentially turning a small-town burial ground with a troubled past into this accessible permanent research archive.
It really demonstrates the necessity, I think, of this kind of high-resolution digital documentation, especially for preserving any site that has a complex, maybe fragmented history.
This has been an incredible deep dive, seriously.
Yeah.
We've traced history from, World War I nurses and forgotten mayors all the way through to 21st century GIS mapping technology.
It covers a lot of ground, doesn't it?
Yeah. We've seen the rich personal histories brought back to life by the local historical society. We've confronted the massive human cost of that administrative complexity, that 19th century decision to move over 3,000 bodies.
The consequences were huge.
And finally, we've seen the real utility of combining video and high-precision spatial data to create this permanent locatable record of a place frozen in time.
It really is a story defined by what was lost and what must be saved going forward.
And that leads perfectly to our final question for you, the listener, to think about. We know the city's official burial records only start in 1894.
Right, that crucial gap.
But the original cemetery was in use way back in the 1860s. That led to thousands of unaccounted for bodies being discovered decades later. That administrative oversight created literally a century of uncertainty and, well, horror.
Yeah.
So now that modern digital preservation efforts can provide this fixed, verifiable timestamp for 2025, what knowledge or evidence, beyond just basic paper records, might we be losing today? What will future researchers wish we had documented with this kind of meter-level, video-verified accuracy?
Think about the ephemeral details of your own community's history. Your local parks, streets, buildings, maybe even cemeteries. What needs to be mapped, recorded before it changes forever?
Something to definitely mull over. We'll see you on the next deep dive.